Okay, I want to talk about a couple other lighting objects that we can put in our scene. Um, Also, we've been test rendering our scene in this render view, but Arnold has its own test renderer, which if you go under Arnold tab here, you can go to Arnold Render View, and this pulls up an interactive renderer. Make sure here that you have your camera rendered, your camera shape rendered, and then you go up to the Render tab and you say Run IPR. And then you get this kind of interactive render view. So let's say, and what we can do actually is right now it's rendering at our full resolution, but I can go to a test resolution and render at a smaller size. Let me scale this down here. I'm just using my middle mouse wheel to kind of zoom out. Okay, so I have like a nice small kind of test render of what I'm seeing. And as I move my light in my scene, I'm getting kind of like interactive render view. So let me talk about some of the other lighting objects. So right now I have a point light here, and I can actually change this to a direction light. I can either create a new direction light in the scene, or I can go over to the attribute editor and let me close these. And I can change the type of light that it is here. So I'm going to change this now to a direction light. And a direction light doesn't have a decay rate here. It's the directional light. It kind of works like the sun, where it floods the entire scene uniformly. But this time, instead of like as an ambient light in all directions, it just does it in this one direction. And here I can see, let me scale my light down a bit, that if I rotate my light, I can change the direction, and here in this little, in the viewport, you can see that the direction that the arrows are pointing is the direction that the light is kind of falling in. And because I don't have the decay rate here, I don't need the intensity to be as intense. So I can drop this down to, let's say, like 1 and see what that does. Okay, so but you see we have some pretty harsh shadows here because this is a direction light. Let me go out to my perspective view for a second. Because this is a direction light, it's, even though my camera is only capturing this little part of the scene here, I have all of these other cubes that are casting shadows then on these cubes. So that's what the direction light does. We also have a spotlight. So let me go ahead and change this to spotlight. And let's frame that up in our scene and also change my panel view to camera 1. And so a spotlight works kind of like a point light, except that it and this again has a decay rate here, and so I'm going to want to bump up this intensity by quite a lot in order to be able to see something in the scene. Let me go to my perspective view again, and I just might not be actually pointing. There we go. I'm not pointing it at anything. So a spotlight works as you would expect it to work. The other thing that I'm seeing here, which is just kind of irritating to me, is under my tool settings, I have my axis orientation to the world space, and I actually want to change this to the object space. So I'm able to kind of rotate this spotlight in a way that makes more sense. What I can see here is that I have, it's going to be a little bit hard, I think, with these cubes to look at the spotlight. Let me go ahead and quickly make a plane in Maya, and let's make this quite a bit bigger, and let me rotate it in the space, and let me also move it up to where we're going to be able to see it. Let me move it away from my cubes perhaps, and let me move my spotlight then a little bit closer to it. So here we can see how the spotlight kind of works. It creates a spot of light in your scene, and let me frame it up here, my perspective view. And there's a bunch of things we can change about the spotlight. I'm still rendering in my camera view. Let me go ahead and actually change this in my Arnold render view to my perspective. Um, and also, just for fun, I might as well, since I'm looking at it here, turn on my resolution gate. Okay, there we go. And so, these lighting objects don't render in the scene as objects, okay? So they're just lights that are kind of invisible, but they cast this kind of light. And what I can see here, or what I can kind of manipulate here within the spotlight attributes are the kind of angle of the cone, so how wide it is. As you can see, the closer you get, the brighter the light gets. The farther away, the dimmer, because it's on this kind of quadratic decay. If I have it set to no decay, it's just going to kind of give me a uniform lighting, no matter the distance. I have this thing called so the cone angle is kind of like widens the angle of the cone, and then this penumbra angle is going to change the softness of that edge. Okay, right, so you can kind of see it here, getting much, much softer. It's so bright here, not having the decay on in my viewport, that I can't really see it. There we go. So this angle here gives me a kind of softness to my light. And let's go back to our lights here. So we've done the spotlight, the point light, the directional light, and the ambient light. We also have an area light. Let me go ahead and create an area light in my scene. And I'm going to pull this up and move it over. And an area light, make this a lot bigger. The size of the light, it will basically emit light from one direction, and you can see the direction here indicated by this line coming out from the light. It's going to emit a kind of flat light over a certain distance, and the larger this is, the wider the distance and the brighter the light gets. And so this is another way that you can kind of just add light to your scene, and you're going to have to kind of play around with which lights are useful to you to kind of create the type of effect you want to create. Again, here I'm seeing it in the viewport. I'm not seeing it here in the Arnold renderer, and that is because we need to set this decay rate to quadratic and then increase the intensity. Okay, so now this is kind of matching. And again, remember, you can change the color. And then there are some light effects here, depending on the light. So you can add a kind of glow, I believe, for spotlights and maybe point lights also. There's a kind of fog. You can maybe play around with adding a kind of fog to your light, and then we have different parameters for shadows also, but we are not going to necessarily get into that right now. In the next video, I want to go over some of the basic Arnold, or some of the Arnold light objects that we have.